1665, they actually brought priests there and set up a little island highway system to walk between and take cars between the numerous Catholic churches they set up around the island, and to set up a re-provisioning point for their ships traveling between Mexico and the Philippines. That lasted for 200 years. The Spanish and the Chamorros did not get along very well. There were a lot of battles back and forth. You know, everybody understands the nature of the conquistador, so I don't know, we need to go into that. So they ravaged the Chamorros, the local tribe people, in the name of God, of course, in the name of bringing Christianity. And they became possessions of the United States, became a U.S. territory in the Spanish-American War in 1898. And what happened was the president sent a warship to Guam to conquer it in 1898, and the warship got there, a single warship. It was a heavy cruiser, I forget the name of it. But he went ashore and told the Spanish governor he was there to conquer Guam because the U.S. and Spain were at war. Well, the Spanish governor had no clue that they were at war. He said, well, you got a warship, I don't, so here it's yours, you can have it.
Smart man.
And they leave. And so the Spanish governor gets on the next ship home. 1898, it's now American territory until 1941, when on December 8th, the Japanese invaded, which was at the same time that they were bombing Japan, Pearl Harbor, they were invading Guam. Wasn't too much of a big deal to invade Guam. There was only about 125 troops there. The Japanese killed all of the American troops. They treated the locals horribly. There were many massacres that are still, of course, scarred today. There's still many people there that lived during the Japanese occupation. And the Japanese took all their personal property, confined all the men. Of course, did the same thing to the Chamorro women that the Spanish had done when they got there. No, don't need to go into details of that either. And then the Americans came back in 1945 during the island hopping campaigns of World War II and retook Guam. The Chamorro people do not like the Japanese people very much, but that is their biggest source of income right now because the Japanese are their largest tourists. The economy of Guam is tourist-based. The largest number of tourists come from Japan. They love coming to the United States. It's only about a 3.5-hour flight, depending on where you come from in Japan, to get to Guam. It's much cheaper, much faster than getting to Hawaii or mainland U.S. So America invaded 1945 and took it back. They don't like the Americans because the Americans just took over everything the Japanese had taken over and didn't honor any of the original Spanish land grants. So they're still fighting about those today. And as a matter of fact, I think 6 months ago, the U.S. Navy just gave them some land back that as part of that deal to give the family that owned it prior to the Japanese invasion. So all that is still going on. So now we come to 2012 when Sally and Mike McCarley invaded Guam. and how I got there and everything in the job is another story, but I was running a small business on the island. All the people that worked for me were local people. All of them Chamorro. Now when I say local people, the Chamorro culture, the island culture are made up of people that are Chamorro, which is anybody from the Marianas, then from islands like Palau and Chuuk and Yap, and other islands you may have never heard of because within Micronesia, the U.S. government allows those people to migrate easily to Guam. A lot of them do so if they can afford to because the economy is much better there. So when I got to Guam, I was asking the Lord, what am I doing here? And I often pray, as I'm sure most of you do, God, open the doors you want me to walk through and close the ones you don't. And it was very obvious that God wanted me to walk through this door. That's a story for another time. But anyway, we end up on Guam, and I'm talking to the Lord about what am I supposed to do when I'm here. And he gave me John 14:12. And it was as clear as a bell. And he, I tell you truly, those who have faith in me will do all the things that I have been doing and even greater things. So I thought, wow, what an assignment. Okay, so as it started to unveil itself to me, the first thing that I noticed was, as I started ministering to the people that worked for me, which were all island people, every one of them, the people in the office, the people in the shop, people in the warehouse, people that worked outside were all island people, most of them young people. Most of them attended a Catholic church because the Catholics, of course, came with the Spanish hundreds of years earlier. But what I also discovered is they also visit the Cirahanu on a regular basis. The Cirahanu is the or witch doctor woman. It can be a man or a woman. I think most of them are women. But anyway, they're witch doctors. So when I would talk to people that were working for me about, well, tell me about your church, tell me about your spiritual beliefs, tell me about your faith. And most of them were saying, well, we believe in the island religion, but we still attend the Catholic Church sometimes. Well, tell me about the Catholic Church. Well, the Catholic Church was pretty much the same there as it is everywhere. So there wasn't anything, revolutionary about what they were telling about the Catholic Church. But what they would tell me about the Cirihanu is they would take their babies to be baptized in the Catholic Church. Then they would take them to the Cirihanu to be blessed by the Cirihanu. And they put some sort of green stuff made out of vegetation from the jungle in their ears and their nose and their mouth. Now, interestingly, the death rate among infants in Guam is twice that rate of the United States. And they're struggling to figure out why.
Wow.
So these people, of course, are ignorant to the fact that the Cirihanu are demonic. They have no clue, but they do understand that there is a spiritual universe.
Yeah.
They clearly understand there's a universe out there that they can't see, they can't touch, and they can't feel, but it's real. They know it's real. So from that point, when we begin to minister to these people, most of them are extremely receptive to hearing the gospel message. And even though they've been brought up in the Catholic Church, they didn't really, most of them don't really understand, did not really understand the gospel message. Most of them, knew what the rosary was and knew what confession was and knew all the rituals within the Catholic Church, but they just saw it as ritualistic. And if they really wanted to feel spiritual power, they went to the Cirihanu. Of course, the spiritual power they're feeling is the enemy.
Right.
But they had no clue. The enemy's pampered and the enemy's doing things for them. And it's all within them. Now, what is revealed to us during my ministry, which was mostly with the men, the young men especially, because I had one man that worked for me that had 10 children with 4 women, and he wasn't married to any of them. Now, that was kind of the extreme, but it was very, very common to have young men in their early and mid-20s with multiple children, with multiple wives, and no marriages, and no thought of being married. When I left there, I think I had like 22 employees. I think there were only 2 of them that were married. And almost all of them had children. Okay? Now, of course, they have a welfare system there, very similar to what they have here, and that's how most of them live. There are requirements for them to work, so that's where most of the base employment comes from. But as we got to know them, and got to know them better, we learned that they don't believe that the Catholic Church really brings any power to them. They believe the power comes from the Cirihanu. So when you preach the gospel to them, they're very open, very receptive, and very interested in what you have to say. And many of them convert. The other people that we talked to a lot in our ministry when we started our little church in 2015 were service people. The servicemen that we talked to and ministered to, that I ministered to, struggle with the same issues that you have here. They're away from their families, they're away from home, there's a lot of temptation. Sexual trafficking is a big problem in Guam. When we first got there, we discovered that there was one woman had brought island girls into her brothel. They came under the guise of being employed as waitresses in restaurants and working in hotels. And as soon as they got there, she would take their passports away and turn them into sex slaves. And the way she kept them in the building was the police would come over and tell the girls, these are real police officers, by the way. The real police officers would come tell the women, if you leave here, we're going to put you in prison. So they stayed there for years. And just the prayer of breaking in the spirit that went on for the first year and a half we were there, aided in breaking up that ring. And those people were exposed through one of the fathers of one of the girls who was a pastor in his own island, came looking for his daughter. She was lost. And found out what was going on, and ultimately it was exposed. The police officers all got 40 years. The madam got life. And the police officer has been back to court a number of times trying to get the sentence reduced, and they're not hearing it. In Guam, there's no ACLU. There's no ACLU protecting, an unusual sentence or prison conditions. So they sentence people with a typical crime here that might get you 10 or 15 years is going to get you 30 or 40 years on Guam, because they just stack them up like cordwood. They just add on a dormitory, and put in some more bunk beds and fill it up with more people. So crime is a big problem on Guam, and much more so than any place I've ever lived. There's a lot of drug and methamphetamine use, and a lot of drug and methamphetamine distribution going on through Guam. But the message that the Lord told me to remind all of you about is that you need to realize, just like I discovered when I was first on Guam, that I didn't know anywhere near what I needed to know to do the spiritual warfare that I had to do on that island. Because it was so highly concentrated. 156,000 people live on the island, plus the military people. I think it might be up to 160,000 now. 3/4 of those people are island people from Micronesia. The rest are coming from Asia, from Vietnam, from Korea, from China, other places like that. But the spirits that come in on those people are different, and the spirits that come in are constant. And the spiritual warfare has to be intense, it has to be daily, and you have to remind and you have to teach. And I just wasn't ready for that when I got there. But through the teachings of working with my wife Sally, and through just constant doing everything I can to learn how to do battle in the spiritual universe against the dark spirits, because the spirit of Leviathan was there. And we had a woman came to our church from Africa and commented that the Leviathan was swimming in the ocean right off the coast. And Sally could see it. So it was extremely common. So within the churches that are on the island themselves, there's a huge problem with narcissism with the pastors. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that at some point in your Christian walk, where it's very difficult to do anything without a pastor's permission and without a pastor's becoming involved in your daily life. There's no organization between the different churches that are binding them together to do any work together. So spiritual warfare is one of the things that Jesus came to earth to do. And he said in Luke 4:18, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free. Amen. So Jesus is telling us that he came to earth to tell us how to fight the enemy, to set us free from the captivity of the enemy that is talked about in 1 John 5:19. And in Paul in 2 Corinthians talks about, in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes. The Apostle Paul is telling us we got to pay attention to what's going on around us. Yes. And we have, even though I had been partially prepared for the spiritual warfare that was going to confront me when I got to Guam, I had no idea how intense it was. Sally and I were praying over the business every Sunday. We would walk and pray over the business. Every day I would walk through it, pleading the blood of Jesus over every place I stepped my foot. And as that happened, as it started to transition, the business kept growing, and the people that were bringing the demons in on a daily basis, the employees that were bringing in the demonic forces daily, that had been there for years, that had been there before the owners that I worked for owned it, had been there with the previous owners. The woman that was the store manager that worked for me, just after I was there about 6 weeks, just walked up, she went to the president of the company and she said, "If you don't get rid of that man, I quit." And he said, "That sounds good to me," and he accepted her resignation. And right then you could just feel an easing as soon as she left. As soon as she left the place, the easing began to lift. And we had a man in the office who was a big proponent of the Sirahanu, or in the shop that was a big proponent of the Sirahanu. And he was almost completely pure Chamorro, which there's very few left. They have a distinctive look to their faces that, if you look at the old pictures, the drawings from the 18th and 19th century of what they look like, he has the look. A special indentation in the nose and the eyebrows that was common to most of the Chamorro people. He has all of that. And he was one of the first ones that told me that I was wasting my time trying to preach Jesus Christ to the people on the island, because they worship the spirits through the Sirahanu. And within 3 months of the woman leaving, he walks up to my desk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and says, "I called my wife, she's going to come pick me up, I'm done here." Okay. Within 10 months, the profitability of the business had tripled.
Wow. Praise
Amen.
God.
All right.
Thank you, Lord.
And it was just amazing. And anybody here that runs a business knows knows that an operating profit of 18% is pretty darn good. And that's what we headed up to. So we give all our praise to Jesus, we give all our praise to the Holy Spirit, and we launched our mission trip with the money I made from running that business, the Lord blessed me with. That gave us the funds to start our mission trips into Africa and Uganda,
Wow.
where we're supporting the Glory Land mission,
Yeah. Amen.
orphanage.
Where I was.
There's over 100 orphans there. There's, I think, 200 students during the classes. And through our little church that we began as a result of those mission trips, we've been able to raise enough money to constantly meet the payroll needs of the school and the food, the dietary needs of all the children. Of course, any donation is going to be
Yes.
greatly appreciated, and every dollar that we receive through that ministry goes to that orphanage and to
Yep.
that